things can't always be the way they're always going to be. They can't always be the same. They can't always go unchanged. Sometimes you got to step out, do things new, do things different, take a chance. When it comes to your health, can you afford to wait? Let's do things differently. Let's talk about that next with Dr. Chad Burton. The heat is on. Let's get cooking. This is Purpose Under Pressure. It's a podcast about people like me, people like you, people like your neighbors and friends and family members. We get up out of bed, we swing our feet out onto the floor, we go about our day in order to accomplish something, and the pressures that try to knock us back off before we lie back down. So that's what this show is all about. It's Purpose Under Pressure. If you're back again to see where we're up to now, that means you liked it at one point. Do me a favor, would you? Would you like this show or subscribe or follow? It helps other people to know that the show is worth watching, worth listening to, worth checking out. And that's why we do this. We want to impact lives and at least let other people know that the pressure isn't just on them and that we all deal with it and we all are holding our feet to the ground and trying to overcome. So thank you very much for liking this program. I do appreciate it. Purpose Under Pressure is brought to you this season and every season so far as we enter into season 6 by Sandler by the Ruby Group, serving sales professionals nationwide from their Akron and Columbus, Ohio locations. They're also in Jacksonville, Florida. If you own a business, if you are responsible for revenue for a business, if you're thinking about changing businesses, revenue matters. How you come across to your clients matter. How you represent yourself matters. All those things are on purpose, and that's what Sandler by the Ruby Group is helping you to do better within. So if you will give them a call, give them a fill out their form on their website. They're at rubygroup.sandler.com. You'll be glad you did, whether you hire them for anything or not. If you just talk to them on the phone, your day will be better. And that's what this is all about. So that is Sandler by the Ruby Group. I hope you will look into them. So I'm excited to talk today about something that I have a lot of opinions about, but I have absolutely zero knowledge about, which is our healthcare in this country. And it's nuts. It's crazy. It's expensive. I don't know whether it's good or bad. I do know that I need it. I do know that we need it, but I don't know what to do about it. And so our guest today is Dr. Chad Burton. Chad's an emergency physician who is transferring out of that and building a company called Mavin Growth. Excuse me. Mavin Growth is a business to consumer consultant for exercise, nutrition, and performance. You think that's a personal trainer? No, we're talking about making your life better so that you can live longer, so that you don't need the healthcare and the healthcare procedures and the healthcare insurances that people are trying to push on you. It's also a business to business healthcare consulting firm, which is helping businesses understand healthcare and their folks and their employees and what they're signing up for, maybe whether they even should. It's a comprehensive topic. We're going to get to it now. Welcome to the show, Dr. Chad Burton.
Hey, Bryan. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here, my friend.
Well, I'm glad I finally stopped talking and got to it because I want everybody to know how nuts I think the world is. And yet here you are waiting to explain to us why that is the case. So thanks for your patience.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. Nuts is the paradigm for me. I came from the same opinion, but I'm eager to dive in.
Yeah, and so let's talk about that. I'm interested in why you do what you do, what got you started, what is your purpose in life, and what you're trying to accomplish. And then we're going to talk about the things that are nuts and
Okay.
and what you're going to do to fix those things.
Great. So, for me, emergency medicine was kind of the starting point. And I thought when you back up, when you come through medicine as a medical student and you're trying to pick out what you want to do, I think there are certain personality types or certain appeals that each little niche tends to draw. And for me, emergency medicine spoke to me because of the chaos, the excitement, the
Hmm.
stories. When you work, especially for me as a nocturnist, I worked night shift for a long time. If you work nights in the emergency room, you see a slice of humanity. You see everybody from the upper class to the lower class, the full spectrum socioeconomic wise. Everyone passes through the emergency room at some point in their life.
Sure.
And so it was this really incredible sort of pulse for me on what was going on in the world around me. And that let me have interesting conversations. It let me hear interesting stories. It let me provide, adrenaline inducing care. It let me do a lot of really, really special things in the world of medicine. And so it was an attractive place for me as sort of a jack of all trades, master of none, and an opportunity to really just sort of take a look around and take in what is going on in society and how that falls back on the healthcare system. So that
Hmm.
was my appeal.
Hmm. And did you want to be an emergency physician, or you wanted to be a physician and ended up in the emergency department?
No, the emergency physician was the spot for me. I thought about
That's
a
where you
few
wanted
other
to be because
things.
of that adrenaline and that
Yeah,
change and
exactly.
all those new things that are happening. Yeah.
Right. You never know what's coming through the doors. And a lot of times you have this, I kind of call it decision making under uncertainty. And what I mean by that, a lot of professions have it. It's not necessarily exclusive to the emergency room, but it's really particular in the emergency room because the decisions we make as providers carry such weight ultimately. And so, decisions under uncertainty for me is having someone come in completely undifferentiated. You have maybe a chief complaint, maybe there was a car wreck or something along those lines. And you now have the clock ticking to figure out what's going on. So there's a triage process. There's a process of figuring out your high priority organ systems, the things that you can't miss. And as more information becomes available as you get into the nitty gritty and the story of what happened with that patient, you have the opportunity to adjust that decision making process and accommodate that new information.
Hmm.
And so I think that's a really useful paradigm for life, because how often do we know the full story of what we're getting into right at the start? Very rarely has been my experience. I don't know about yours. But I thought it was a really, really powerful sort of parallel for that. And it was something that appealed to me very, very deeply from the get go. So absolutely, emergency medicine was where I wanted to go.
And so when you're there, give us a little bit of insight if you can before we get into some of the pressure. The emergency room, sometimes we don't have a choice. We wake up there.
Right.
Something happened and how did I get here, and you're just there. Sometimes we have a choice. And
Uh-huh.
you mentioned you see all different types of, what do I need to know as a user? What do I need to know as a human being
I,
about what's actually happening in that emergency room?
I think a few things. One is definition of emergency. We have shifted it from a sort of social standard to a perception of emergency. And maybe there was never really a concrete social standard, but I think if you ask someone what is an emergency and you gave them a few options, we might have, a few non-negotiables: a car wreck, a fall with broken bones, and obviously displaced, shoulder or extremity, a, COPD exacerbation, respiratory failure. These things are things that I think you ask pretty much anyone walking down the street and they'd say, that's definitely emergency.
Hmm.
What we see sometimes, though, is the paradigm shifts and it becomes this discussion of, well, I think it's an emergency. I have the sniffles and my belly hurts, and I called my primary care doctor 3 times in the same day, and they couldn't get me an appointment
They're
until next
busy.
week.
Yeah.
And so here I am at the emergency room. And that's not to say that's everybody, but that is certainly a slice of the population that comes through with maybe an emergency to them that is not necessarily an emergency from what I'm trained as an emergency standpoint.
Yeah. Yeah. And is that part of, as we kind of shift into what you're now doing, is that part of the problem that people don't understand? And I think there's also so many legal ramifications and,
Mhm.
what's the word I'm looking for? Whether I'm liable, whether
Uh-huh.
a doctor's liable, just go to the emergency room. There's so many
Yeah.
different, almost misleading ideas of how we should take care of ourselves. And we
Mhm.
just sometimes just end up at the emergency room because we don't know what else to do.
Exactly. And I
You've
think
got
that
some
is
different ideas though, don't you?
I think that's a very important thing you just said, though. A lot of times we're told to, and so in some
Yeah.
sense, it's not to blame and say, oh, this is a patient that, was necessarily silly for being here. Certainly that happens sometimes, but the majority is it's a system issue. It's someone saying, hey, you said just enough scary things to me on the phone with my nurse. And of course, in our systems, that means go to the ER. If you call your primary care doctor and they say and tell them you have chest pain, and you're an adult, you're in your 40s, 50s, or 60s, they're going to say go to the emergency room.
Hmm.
And that just is what it is. But I think there's also a paradigm sometimes right now as healthcare has gotten more complicated. There's also needing to be an understanding, and really that's kind of where the wheels started turning on my end.
Yeah.
There needs to be an understanding of what healthcare can do for you. Where in the system do you as a patient need to go to actually get the care that you need? Instead of take the legal ramification or pass the legal buck and say, hey, primary care doctor sent me to the ER. Okay, me as the ER doctor, I've done a medical screening evaluation, determined there's no emergency. Not saying there's not something that needs further evaluation, but you have
Right.
no life-threatening condition, no emergent thing I can stabilize. So I kick you back to your primary care doctor, feeling like I didn't do anything for you as the patient. or the belly pain person who's come in and they have chronic abdominal pain. It keeps them up at night. They have difficulty eating. They have difficulty sleeping. They've seen their primary care doctor. They've been to the ER. They've had a GI referral, and they're going round and around and around with no one being able to really sort of quote unquote figure out what the issue is.
Yeah.
And I think that happens very commonly right now.
And that's what leads, I think that's kind of what is leading you to try to help inform people and make better decisions.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about what is driving the idea of building Mavin Growth and how you feel like you're going to be able to impact and maybe make life better for others.
Sure. A lot of the things that started with Mavin Growth initially comes back to a story from COVID. And it's really the story of COVID for me as a healthcare provider. And the politics of COVID came in, and that derailed a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
For me, if we strip away the political discussion, COVID was a disease that had truly scary physiology at the starting point of it. It was something that the healthcare system had not seen before, and it was something that exposed a lot of weaknesses in an already weighed down system, an already
fragile
yeah,
system.
exactly,
Mm-hmm,
an already
mm-hmm,
fragile system.
mm-hmm.
And so if we go back to that, what I started sort of to notice was, one, a lot of folks come into the ER and they have a fear that something is wrong with them. And that fear sometimes is less the symptom and more the what ifs. It's not so much the chest pain. It's more the what if this is the heart attack? And what if I don't get an opportunity to reconnect with my estranged parent or my estranged family member? What if this is I spent, years at a job that didn't really appreciate me and I didn't feel appreciated at, and I gave up my working life, and now I'm in a position where I'm afraid that I don't have time to take for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so what I see a lot of times is, yes, there's a presentation for someone coming to the ER, but a lot of times there is a fear of wishing they could do something different and a sense that maybe time is running out. And that for me was the starting point for Mavin Growth. And that came about during COVID. We started with the no visitor policies, and a lot of people truly died of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't get them shipped out to higher level care facilities because we had transportation issues. I worked at some facilities where we had resource difficulties, and we just had to do the absolute best that we could. And when people die under those circumstances with no visitors, they die afraid and they die introspective. And I had a standing sort of policy with the floors that I worked on at that time and the departments that I was in. If there was someone that we knew that was approaching end of life scenario that was still coherent, still talkative, we wanted to spend as much time with them so to prevent them from dying alone.
Mm-hmm.
And when you sit in that situation enough times, I started to notice similar discussions coming through. No one ever said, well, gosh, Chad, as I look back at my life, I really wish that I had spent more time not doing the things that I cared about, not doing my hobbies and my passions. I really wish I had spent less time with my loved ones.
Mm-hmm.
I wish I had spent more time at the job that did not appreciate me, give up more of myself for the boss that didn't appreciate me. I wish that I had I wish that I had jumped and asked the girl or the guy out 20, 30 years ago, the one that got away.
Yeah.
And you start to hear this story of regret. And
Over
what
and
a
over
shame.
again.
Right. What
Yeah.
a shame to know that someone's clock is running out. And those are the things that burden them. And it makes me think of that, sort of, Wayne Gretzky thing. You miss 100% of the shots that you don't take.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there really is a lot of truth that as we go through a system for deeply invasive procedures in healthcare, one of the things that we're doing that for is a fear of dying. And I think that fear of death comes from a place of a life poorly lived, whether intentionally or otherwise. Maybe we went to sleep for a period of time. We put our lives on autopilot and we woke up 10 to 15 years later and we realized we hadn't been engaged. And that got me thinking, is there a way to engage folks on the front end? Maybe instead of writing a prescription, maybe instead of offering, a new diagnostic theory, maybe we should help people live a higher quality on the front end.
From a physician's point of view.
Wouldn't that be interesting? Now that's totally
extremely interesting.
That's totally outside the physician's paradigm.
Right. That's not what a physician is meant to care for you after you've been sick. You're talking about not just a positive frame of mind. You're actually talking a physician's care to get the right ingredients for the recipe in the first place.
Right. Now that's a paradigm shift though, because our structure, our healthcare system is not incentivized that way. No. I'm incentivized to provide care. I'm incentivized to prescribe care. I'm not incentivized to prevent things from happening on the front end. But when we have a discussion about healthcare, the perpetual discussion point is cost. And if that's cost to the patient, cost to the system, cost to the insurers, cost to the help to the hospitals, at the end of the day, someone has to cover the bill. And it's an interesting discussion to say, well, hey, maybe if we focused on some of these things on the front end, we wouldn't have cost be as much of an issue on the back end. And maybe if we were transparent enough, and I'm not saying this is a conspiracy theory, these things happen for a lot of reasons, but maybe if we were transparent enough to have conversations with our patients as physicians that truly mattered on the front end, the total dependent conversation, the you and me, we really get into it. What do you want? What are your goals? What do you want for your family members? How do you want to live? And how do you want to die? What if we had that conversation and we started there instead of just saying things like, oh, do you want me to do everything possible for you? You know, what if we really got into the nitty gritty of what care can provide? Because we live in a world, Bryan, now, you know, if you rewind the clock, maybe 60, 70 years ago, I'm not sure the exact time frame, but, you know, when we had like 10 treatable diseases and penicillin and maybe like 2 or 3 other medicines, that was healthcare.
Yeah, that was healthcare.
We've changed. We've grown. We've gotten so exorbitantly complicated. We can physiologically keep someone alive. But that doesn't mean that at a spiritual level or a personal level, we're doing that person any justice at all, that we're doing them any service with the care we're providing. And, you know, whether or not there's an opportunity to discuss that on the front end, I think that's something that we should investigate. And for me, that's how this discussion came about.
What might be, and if you can make it a fairly concise example, but what might be a way that you might treat a patient?
Sure.
In a proactive way. Instead of this, you're going to do this. What does that look like?
I think a lot of times we wait for the disease. You know, we wait for the thing to rear its head. And when we talk about disease, I want to be very clear that disease in this sense is a diagnosis. But what if we separate the word disease into dis-ease, that feeling that something is off? And I think a lot of people walk around with that. I think that is a very relatable circumstance right now. We look at feelings of depression, anxiety, internal restlessness. I think that those can be clinical and pathological, but I think also maybe that's the world saying, hey, you're not addressing your purpose as a human being right now. And whether that's intentionally that you're not, or whether it's just you're not paying attention and you're not, these symptoms are things that I think were given to us as humans to say, hey, I need to be clear about what I want, what my path in life is, what my purpose in life is. And I think that a physician could be useful in having that discussion.
Everyone in the organization needs to know how to sell. Sales is the strength of any company. Whether or not you're in marketing, operations, or even finance, everyone has a strong shared accountability towards driving top-line revenue. Whether or not you're client-facing or talking over the phone, you're able to build a stronger level of rapport with the clients. Everyone in the organization shares that responsibility to know how to sell.
Interesting. And now, and this might be part of the pressure, but you're bucking a big train here.
Oh, yeah. I'm here to cause a ruckus, my friend.
Talk to me about that, because and maybe there's other things that are happening that are causing issues, but I'm interested in the pushback here.
Yeah.
You can't be everyone's friend at the insurance level, I don't think.
No. And, you know, I don't mean it. There are lovely insurance people. There's lovely hospital administrators. These are lovely people. But if they're not doing justice to the patients, if they're not doing a service in the services they provide, well, you know, it's not a feelings game for me.
Yeah.
I've had enough late night conversations, and that was one of the things that I truly liked about being a nocturnist, Bryan. I could come in and be a little bit off the cuff. I could be a little bit indirect and say things, you know, maybe that the daytime administrators might not condone. I could be honest about the system and say, hey, the system is outright broken, and I'm sorry that you're stuck in the middle of it. This is what you and I are going to do. It's amazing when you start to have conversations like that with your patients. And so what it started as for me was just one-off conversations. I read a thing in medical school. It was just a meme on social media, scrolling through, and it said, never be afraid to have a conversation that counts. And I thought that in the midst of all the technology, all the sophistication, all the resources that we have, the thing I've seen time and time again is our healthcare system is still limited by people and personal factors. We cannot get away from difficult conversations, from meaningful conversations. But intentional or otherwise, we as providers have a tendency to hide behind our schedule, our rounding, our family life, our procedures, all the technology. We have a tendency not to engage in those discussions. And maybe that's to protect ourselves by not taking the patient's burden of their disease and going home with that. But I think if we're going to be in this space, we have to have those conversations that count. And so the conversation that counts for me is, what do you want? What are your goals here as a patient? If this is a life-threatening thing, do you want to go home and die in, your own terms, in your own environment, with your things and your people at the bedside? Or do you want to take the procedural route and do interventions and see what happens with that? But understanding that there are repercussions. It's not like you just do a procedure and boom, the magic wand has been waved. A lot of times procedures that are truly interventional, those end up being things that then need to go to skilled nursing. We need to have dietary issues, like total parenteral nutrition. We need to have PICC lines. We need to have catheters. We need to have tubes and drains and holes and orifices. And if we explain those things on the front end, I have a sneaking suspicion some people might say, whoa, I don't know if I want that.
You mentioned the idea of the businesses that you're helping as well.
Uh-huh.
Are they so I can see a person saying, yeah. That's what I want. I don't want the what you just said, the tube and the orifice. I don't want that. I want this other thing instead.
Uh-huh.
Are the businesses pushing back, or are they also seeing this as an opportunity to help their people live better lives? How does that work from a business to business point of view?
I think that's a little bit TBD to be determined. But what I have noticed is businesses are profoundly interested in trying to understand the landscape as well. It's gotten so complicated that most people outside of the subspecialty, outside of the practice of medicine, a lot of people don't understand really what's going on in the healthcare system. And I'll have routine conversations just in my day-to-day life of, hey, I went to the emergency room with my kid and this is how it happened. And why did it happen that way? And to me on the inside, there's a very clear reason that the person had an experience that way. Or, hey, my mother-in-law got admitted in the hospital. They said it was this issue. And the next day they discharged her. And I don't really feel like they did anything. We start to sort of see these stories there. And I think explaining that to folks and helping businesses understand that is a starting point. And where I hope that goes is the idea that maybe we start to have a change in that perception, a better understanding of what the healthcare system can and can't do. And that maybe that has a cost benefit that businesses start to be intrigued in.
So, Dr. Burton, you are full of purpose here, and it's oozing out of you. I'm interested, though, in the pressure a little bit deeper here. Are you afraid? Are you scared? Are you worried at all? Are you on the frontier first? Is there other people doing this, or do you have a model? And are you concerned about leaving an industry where you're able to actually impact, at least in some way, and coming into this new thing that all the forces are going to be pushing against you? How does that feel to you? Does that worry you?
Yeah, it did initially a little bit. Yeah. And there was some growing pains where you have to get to the point, the tipping point. And I think from that standpoint, for me personally, it was this unknown of, would this work? I'm not sure it would. I'm not quite ready to jump off and, take the ledge and say, hey, this is what I'm doing, and so be it. But little by little, late night conversation. And what I started to notice was, if nothing else, I had patients that were agreeing with the way that I was addressing my philosophy for healthcare. And if I'm going to have taken the oath as a physician to first do no harm, then I think that I should be interested in the thoughts and feelings of the patients as I discuss that with them. And so getting a vote of confidence that, hey, you're a little bit different, but I like what you're saying, and I'd be interested if you were my primary care doctor and I'm not a primary care doctor.
Right.
You have that conversation enough times and it says, well, hey, maybe there's something here. And, I came from a household, for better or for worse, that I was deeply encouraged to find my internal passion, my internal sort of purpose first. And if that is found, then so be it. I'll jump off on the rest of it. What happens, the cards can fall how they fall.
Let it come as it comes. And you just said something. Actually, by the way, Chad, that's exactly what this show is all about. It's about, I'm going to stand for this no matter what.
Yeah.
And I'm not backing down. I'm not going to take a shortcut. I'm not going to quit.
Right.
This is what I'm here for, and this is what's going to happen. And I applaud you for that. as you move forward, what are the pressures that you think you're going to still have to overcome? What are the things you're concerned about? What keeps you up at night here as you're trying to make this impact in people in a way that they don't even know exists?
Right. First and foremost, it's quality of service. I want to make sure that the clients that I bring in right now, I'm giving them absolutely the full 100% that I'm able to address their needs, to understand their needs, and to build them the best package for what they're looking for. Secondarily is scale. At some point, I'm going to break that system because it's going to scale bigger than I myself can handle, and it's going to scale bigger than my very small team right now can handle. And so we're going to build up. And then at some point, there'll be external pressures. We'll have people from the industry standpoint. They're going to say, hey, y'all are causing a ruckus, so we're not sure we like it. And we're going to address those pressures. And I think that at some point, though, there's a thing I've been kind of thinking about lately. We talk a lot about post-traumatic stress and how that is a deeply debilitating thing for our veterans, for people that have been through traumatic life experiences. And that's true. I see that. I see a lot of that. But what if we were to talk about post-traumatic growth? The idea that maybe those pressures lead you to a better place. In some sense, Bryan, I want to have those problems because those problems are bigger than the person that I am today. Those problems tell me that I'm on the right path when I encounter those problems. And so I'm going to keep growing and building and creating the business structure and myself personally in such a way that I encounter those problems, because that's helping me be the best person of myself that I can.
I'm interested if my perception of this is accurate. You said just a little bit ago, first do no harm. Mm-hmm. And it got me thinking, the English language is powerful. It means something. First, maybe what we're doing in the medical world is we're just not understanding first. Because if I come to see a doctor after something's already broken, after I already have the cancer, after I already have the tube in the orifice, is it too late for first? Is that what you're kind of saying, is that first we do no harm, which means now? Before we get sick, before it's the end, too late.
Yeah.
Interesting.
How much time do we spend? And, maybe it's a little bit of a cheesy cliche, but how much time do we spend in that sense of we spend our working years to earn money? We sacrifice our health in the process. And then I see a very common story where folks nearing retirement are now spending their hard-earned money in an attempt to regain that health. Oh. What sense does that make? And is there not a way that we could potentially prioritize that on the front end and say, hey, let's build let's be the best employees. Let's build the best companies. Let's be the best people we can, but let's do right by ourselves first.
Let's live.
Let's live.
So if someone, and I'm going to give you a chance to let people know how to reach out to you, but if someone's listening right now going, I think I get it because it's a new concept. What things might they be thinking to themselves where you might say, if you're thinking this, if you're concerned about this, if you're wondering about this, you might want to give me a call.
Yeah.
What might that be?
For me, I think it's the people that have had a recent experience. And that's a broad topic. So what I mean by that, it's the person who in middle age has noticed that, all of a sudden they've got some sort of nagging discomfort somewhere. Maybe it's a little bit of chest pressure they've never had, and it's keeping them up a little bit at night. Maybe it's a trip to the ER recently. You had a thing that was bothering you, but you got a clean bill of health, meaning there wasn't an immediately identifiable emergency, but something's still not quite right. Maybe it's in the sense of you went to see your parents recently, and by golly, the last year or so since you've seen them, they sure have aged. Yeah. It's these little sneaking cues that life is passing us by, and maybe we're not as present as we should be. Those are the things that I want people to take notice of and give me a call about.
And how would they do that, and what should they expect when they do?
So you can find me first off on Instagram at @TheChadBurton. You can find me at mavingrowth.com. That website's under construction right now. We had a little takedown with a second version of it coming up shortly, so that'll be back online shortly. But I would be interested in a discussion point on that. I'm not right for everybody, but there's certainly a large group of people that I think I do provide services and could provide a benefit to work with. And that is not necessarily geographically restricted. I can work remotely, and we can build packages to help people be their best versions of self.
Tremendous. And so if someone is listening and they're thinking about it, they can go to mavingrowth.com when it's up. Do you have an idea how long it'll be?
Probably the end of the week we'll have a second.
Oh, yeah. So this isn't going to air. It's probably up by now. It might be up. Go ahead, folks, and click on mavingrowth.com. You see the link there on the screen, or reach out to you through Instagram. And, I hope that people do. I think it's funny. It's almost like AI. Someday, 30 years from now, we're going to look back on AI and go, how did we ever live without this? Or man, remember when it was like that, or whatever
Right.
it might be. Just the same as with iPhones or computers. We didn't always have them, and yet we went through life, and now we couldn't
How do we
imagine
do
living
without?
without it.
Right.
Imagine in this situation that we're looking back 20 years, 15 years, 5 years from now going, holy cow, we used to do medicine that way. Now we're
Imagine.
doing it this way.
Right.
Amazing that would be. And that might be the forefront and the frontier that you're on. And I encourage people to get on there with you because like you said, you can't get our time back.
We sure can't. We sure can't. And what an opportunity to take charge of that on the front end. And to that point, Brian, I found a quote recently to the idea that maybe just maybe we're overdue for this in this profession. This was from Thomas Edison in 1903. I've got it right up here on the desktop real quick. The doctor of the future will give no medicine, but will interest his patients in the care of the human frame, diet, and in the cause and prevention of disease.
He said that in 1903.
1903, my friend.
Someone
We are
needs to find that
overdue.
quote again. We are overdue. Absolutely. And isn't it funny how we go in waves?
Yeah, right.
And here we are again. God bless you, Dr. Chad Burton, for all the things you've done. I'll never forget the image that I had in my head while I was talking to you about you staying up at night with folks during COVID and helping them to pass without being alone. I thank you for that.
That was truly a meaningful part of my life. That was not necessarily a part I'd like to do again.
No.
But I have learned more from those experiences than I could ever possibly recount. And I would be doing a disservice to those people that told me their stories if I didn't take this stand and try to build this vision that I have.
Folks, that's Dr. Chad Burton. Dr. Burton, thank you for being our guest on Purpose Under Pressure.
Hey, thank you so much, Brian. It's been a pleasure.
You know, sometimes, folks, you have to take a shot and take a chance and make a difference and do something differently. And the next time someone just says, here, fill out this form and come on back, you know, question it just a little bit. I've got the doctor's friends. I've got insurance friends. I've got everybody and everyone wants to do the right thing. But don't say no to something before you know. Give that a try. That is mavingrowth.com and Dr. Chad Burton, our guest on Purpose Under Pressure. It's brought to you by Sandler by the Ruby Group. Sellers are under pressure to perform. Sandler helps you to succeed on purpose. You'll find all past episodes of Purpose Under Pressure at bryanmediastrategies.com/podcast and wherever you stream your favorite shows. We do this every week, and we will see you next time on Purpose.